We now have time for a brief Q&A. So if anybody wants to ask questions to any of us, any of the presentations that we just gave, please, once again, feel free to get to the mics. I'll probably start with one quick question while you think about what you would like to ask. So, Doreen, one thing that I was wondering about. So, so first of all, thanks a lot for pointing out this very, very important issue of the sustainability and CO2 footprint of buildings. I was wondering, how do you convince stakeholders to actually adopt sustainability practices? Because I could imagine that depending on what you suggest, there's also certain cost involved in building more sustainable as compared to traditional.
Yes, I think the stakeholders is the big question all the time, because the stakeholders really want to know what's in it for them by implementing this. So it's really trying to create awareness of the impact as the world, and the whole world, we're living it together. It's for us, but also for our future children, our future grandchildren. So it's trying to create the impact, and that this is actually a big issue, and by doing this is actually creating an impact to the bigger picture. But also the government can play a big part in this by creating policies that really push stakeholders to want to do this. So creating incentives that the stakeholders can feel like are of interest to them, and try to push them using the incentives to actually implement sustainable strategies. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we have questions over there. Yes, please.
Hi, thank you for the interesting talks. I have a question also for Doreen. With the wood resin, I remember you showed a curve of the stress strain curve, but how does this material react to different kind of strains, like torque, twisting, or shear kind of stresses?
Okay, so in this experiment, we only focused on flexural bending, because we were trying to mimic what happens in a building beam. So when it comes to torsion and shear, we haven't investigated that yet. But the results were solely based on flexural bending.
Thank you.
And we have another question over there.
Thank you also from my side for your interesting talks. Actually, my question is related to all of your topics, since you are talking about sustainability. And recently, I mean, it's increasing papers are claiming sustainability. And I wanted to ask, what are your approaches or your thoughts how to ensure that we are actually creating an environmental benefit with the findings or inventions?
Do you want me to start? Well, actually, that's a really great question, because, you know, in my opinion, when we're talking about the sustainability, the majority is not considering the whole cycle of these technologies. So, for example, it is good to kind of, as I mentioned, to see the broader picture, because, for example, if we say that one technology is green, but, for example, that technology requires mining, for example, which is not environmental friendly, or, for example, it uses semiconductors, and the semiconducting manufacturing is not really green. So we cannot consider that technology, the end result, as a green technology. So it's good to have the broader picture in that sense in order to make everything sustainable.
I guess this is a really, really important point. You need to consider the whole process, all aspects that goes into the production, and then also end of life cycle of whatever you're producing, and to really see if everything is completely sustainable. Maybe from my perspective, so the things that I'm doing are still like fairly fundamental science. So we're still like trying to build these photocatalytic systems. It's still quite far from an application, but the way that I approach this research, I try to identify factors that I think are unsustainable in established practices, and try to come up with ways how to circumvent them, how to address them, how to improve them, to replace existing practices with newly developed, invented technologies. But obviously, in the end of the day, one always needs to check whether or not this process is indeed as sustainable as one claims.
Yeah, just to add on that, I think we also have to look at the scalability of it. So, for example, you're proposing a sustainable solution. It might look sustainable even at the life cycle stage at only that scale. But when you try to start scaling it to a bigger picture to other countries and making it accessible to more people, then it becomes not sustainable anymore, because there are so many things involved, like the logistics of it, and other things. So I think when we're talking about sustainability, we have to consider all the matters involved, not only the life cycle stage, but also how scalable it is and how accessible it will be to other people. And after assessing that, will it still be sustainable, as we say?
Yes, I think I agree with everyone who has said before me, but just to provide a food perspective, is that right now there's this generally concept that as long as, like, for example, my vegan omelette, as long as we're using plant-based ingredient, it's sustainable. But I do understand that there needs to be a lot more thorough life cycle assessment, because some crops do require a lot more materials to produce as compared to other crops. And also, there's also, like, for example, the amount of water that's required to make all this food, and would it be more sustainable if, let's say, we were to use all the byproducts to feed animals instead, and then would the animals produce it more sustainably? So I do agree that on a broader scheme, there's a lot of questions on the sustainability of the food products that I presented.
Thank you.
Another question, yes, please.
Hello. So thanks for the wonderful presentations. My question is to Ms. Doreen. So one of the strategies you suggested to improve sustainability was to, I think, replace concrete use with timber, reinforced timbers. But according to my understanding, timber comes from deforestation, and that also contributes to carbon dioxide emissions. So how would you justify replacing concrete with timber? And also, I don't think it's a one-to-one replacement, because the structural integrity you would need from perhaps 1 cubic meter of concrete, you would need a lot more timber to replace that. So it's
Yes, actually, I love this question, because that's exactly what my research is trying to solve. So yes, cutting timber is a problem, and that's why we try to encourage reforestation after cutting timber. But also the project that I just demonstrated, the carbon fiber reinforced timber, the main aim was to solve this problem, that if I have concrete of 1 meter cube, I would need probably 3 meter cube of timber to actually produce even the same amount of strength. But what this reinforcement does is, having smaller cross sections of timber that are reinforced with carbon fiber, I can still produce the same amount of load-bearing capacities as concrete and other conventional materials. So timber alone cannot do this. Timber reinforced with carbon fibers, then now we are talking. So we can have a smaller cross-section of timber and reinforce it with carbon fibers and have the same amount of strength. What this does, it means now instead of needing 3 meter cube to match 1 meter cube of concrete, maybe we need less than 1 meter cube to match 1 meter cube of concrete. That means we need to extract less amount of timber from the forest to actually use it in construction. And we can always replace the amount of timber that we are taking by replacing it by reforestation. But also we have to think about the carbon sequestration properties of timber. Timber has carbon sequestration properties, and what that means is it stores carbon inside. So when you're building a timber block, you're not just building a block, you're building a carbon dioxide bank. So you're storing the carbon dioxide inside the building itself. So that removes the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So what that does, if you calculate all the amount of carbon dioxide minus and plus, you will know that everything has been offset to the amount that has actually been cut from the forest.
Okay, thank you. Great. That's great. And also, I have a small question for Ms. Uma. Your research was quite interesting as well. You have done a lot of studies on the structural properties, but I think everyone is wondering, what about the taste?
So in food science, we also have sensory tests. Which discipline do you come from?
I'm working on composites, material science.
Oh, okay. So in food science, we also have sensory tests, and I've done some sensory tests on some other products, but not on this omelette yet. And for this omelette, okay, I got like 80 good friends to taste for me, but in food science, in order to consider it as a publication, it has to go through investigational review board. But my 80 good friends, through the informal testing, have all said that it has a cereal-like flavor to it because it's amaranth, so it has a cereal flavor. It's quite flavorful, not quite like omelette, the same texture, but it's more flavorful, and it really depends whether people like the flavor of amaranth itself. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if I may also ask a follow-up question on this, because I think it's so cool just to like replace animal products with like your approach, like finding proteins and getting the properties right. I was really curious, how did you choose the protein to start with? And then maybe a more funny question is, how many real eggs did you have to break for this research?
How many what?
How many real eggs did you have to break?
Oh. Okay, so how I started out choosing the proteins to begin with was that I don't know, I just like, I think for the first like 3 months of when I started on this project, I just screened many different kinds of protein. And that's why I say amaranth is good, because it finally gives me a neutral color. So many proteins at alkaline pH is either brown, red, green, blue, all kinds of colors. So I think in food science, one of the main things is actually color, because if it has the same texture but it's a blue colored omelette, I don't think any of you will want to eat it. Yeah. And for the number of eggs I break, I think I break them all the time. But hopefully I try to eat the excess of, yeah, because sample size are always so small and there's always a lot of eggs left. So I eat egg very often.
Great, thank you. We have more questions. If not, I might have another one for Sana. I really like this whole inkjet system. It really seems like it makes everything so much simpler and so much more efficient, and you also get like even better values afterwards. I'm just curious for like the specific one that you have been showing us today, how close is this now to application? Do you still need to improve this further, or is this already ready to be used in a...
Well, the inkjet printing, as I mentioned, is a mature printing technology. It's already there, and it is already scaled. So you can use printers in different scales. But the thing is that we still need to develop it for this application. And I think it's much more better to be used as infiltration technique, because as we mentioned, that during the jetting process it's kind of reducing the particle size by breaking them, and also because of its high velocity, it's really penetrating into the substrate and gives you a better interfacial area between your electrode and also your electrolyte, which is really important in different electrochemical devices like supercaps, batteries, and also fuel cells. So it depends on your application.
I have a question for Adrian.
Oh.
Adrian, I'm not very familiar with it, but I understand that in the chloroplast, there are several proteins, right?
Yeah.
That are used to facilitate the conversion of solar energy to fuel, And then I'm just wondering, so for your research, you are saying that you just developed this one protein that's able to self-convert, or are there multiple proteins in this pathway? And would adding more proteins improve the efficiency?
So at the moment, this is still like very proof of concept. We have made this one protein and it works. And I think this now really gives a lot of like exciting further engineering opportunities. So given that protein design has matured to the point where you can really reliably design structures and have a very good success chance with your designs, we're now looking into making slightly more complex structures, not that much more complex, so that manufacturing will still be simple. But so things we're looking into, for instance, is adding dyes of different colors, so to broaden the absorbance spectrum, to add binding sites for redox mediators so that the electron delivery to and from the protein is improved. And also something that you can do in biology, if you think about it. So biology has a very great ability to self-assemble into really complex structures. I mean, our bodies are just formed by more or less themselves, by magic. And this is kind of something that we also want to exploit. So we want to design these proteins in a way that they interact with each other to form a very defined thin monolayer on top of electrodes. So the idea of this research is really to exploit all of these favorable properties of biology, specifically proteins, to further improve the systems.
So it's more efficient than chloroplast?
Sorry?
Is it more efficient than the chloroplast?
No, it's not. But it's much easier to handle. And so the research has tried for a really long time to put chloroplasts or photosystems, anything extracted from biology, onto electrodes. And this tends to work, but there are, to my understanding, a lot of stability issues. Because these proteins are so complex, they're quite often membrane bound. They really don't want to be in this artificial context. And this is something that we're hoping to be able to address in our system.
Wow.
Another question.
All right, so thank you very much for a great presentation for all of you. But I have these quick questions for Doreen. Okay, so could you please elaborate more on how the applications of the carbon fiber in the timber. So after it's in orbit recycling process, what is this application after that?
Okay, so you mean the process of recycling after it has been used?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So we try to investigate what will happen after the use of carbon fiber reinforced timber and trying to see if it's possible in the first place, because we have now reinforced it with carbon fibers, applied lamination with epoxy resin. So the result was that the timber can be reused again, because the carbon fiber is actually passed, I don't know if you could see in the pictures earlier, but it has passed through very thin grooves outside of the timber. So it's easy to sand the timber and reuse the timber again for different purposes, but the carbon fiber cannot be reused again. Mm-hmm. So we try to see what is the alternative of the carbon fiber, because this time we don't want to waste the carbon fiber. And we noticed that we actually have recycled carbon fiber available in the market. And when we use recycled carbon fiber, we obtain more or less the similar result with carbon fiber reinforcement on the timber. Mm. So in this case, we can now use recycled carbon fiber to actually recycle the timber. And then the recycled carbon fiber will be actually in the last stage of its use, but the timber can be reused again and again.
Okay, for timber, you use for construction materials or other purpose?
So the timber that I showed here, we designed it as a beam section in a building. So imagine a high-rise building, and we took a beam section that is taking loads from 2 different columns. So this is actually from a building, but it can be used for different purposes. And one of the applications that I just showed was a timber bench. So we used the same mechanism, but just applied it on a bench, which actually had the similar load-bearing capacity as a beam, because the bench was actually having one support on the left and one support on the right. So it was actually mimicking the positioning of the beam, and it performed exactly as the timber beam. So it can be applied anywhere, yes. Mm-hmm.
So is there any degradations of the material after at the end of the usage life?
I hope I can experiment that, because my experiment till now is we just try to reinforce and see how much performance it has right now. But we need maybe to use it and apply it for a few times and then see how it performs. But I can attest that the bench that I showed, it was created 3 years ago, and it's still being used till today. So it's actually doing pretty well so far.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we have one more question. Yes.
Yes, thank you. I actually have a question for Dr. Adrian. Yeah. I was curious about the strategy that you come up with the protein that were able to trap light. Yeah. I mean, I was a bit concerned about heat or thermal stability, right? Because in the nature, this protein kind of stay together and they may be more stable, but in your case, the protein kind of be like purified at one, and I would like to know if you have any criteria for the selection.
Fantastic question, and I think the problem is even much more severe than what you're saying, because when you build a solar cell, what you want to do is you want to assemble it, put it on your rooftop, and don't touch it for at least 5-6 years. So we really need to make sure that the protein materials that we're designing are extremely stable and will endure over that time frame. And so I guess this is one big limitations when using natural proteins, because they tend to be quite flexible. Actually, nature doesn't really want to have like brick-like structures within a cell, so it's kind of logical that they tend to remain fluid at room temperature. However, when you look at de novo design proteins, so proteins that have been created entirely from scratch without taking any inspiration from nature, these can be made so stable that they are really true bricks. They don't melt if you increase the temperature to 100 degrees or even higher. So I think one big argument for actually moving to protein design is that we can optimize the structures in a way that we introduce so many beneficial interactions, that we enhance the packing between side chains so much that the final structure will be so stable that it will actually endure these prolonged times and actually quite high temperatures that solar cells can face.
Fantastic. So may I ask, how long would it take for your technology to be able to beat Martin Green technology?
If you ask the funders, 5 years. No, but so I'm hoping to have something that is on like a comparable level in terms of efficiency to dye-sensitized solar cells, or even like silicon-based photovoltaics within like the next 5 years or so. And then It's really a question of how far can we push this, how far can we push efficiency, how far can we push long-term stability. But what is really nice is that these systems fairly readily intersect with dye-sensitized solar cell technologies that are already established. So I'm not reinventing the wheel when it comes to the downstream assembly of this solar cells.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I guess with this, we need to close the Q&A.
Yes.